Hey everybody, welcome back to the Starting Your Private Practice podcast. I'm Miranda.
And I'm Kelly.
Today we're going to be diving even deeper into all things money, finances, and fee with one of those amazing coaching sessions that you love to listen in on.
We're so grateful for the opportunity to share someone else's journey, and you might relate to a few of the things that come up. So let's get started.
Hey, Lisabeth, thanks for being here with us.
Hello, I'm excited to be here.
We appreciate your vulnerability especially when it comes to money. My gosh, right? Like, who wants to talk about money in public? It's one of those things you don't talk about at the dinner table, right? But you're here and we're excited to help you.
Thank you. I'm excited to see where I end up.
Yes. I think it's especially interesting, you being the person that's been on here, because you've already had such a transformation with money from where you started to where you are. And so even in that space, to see how that shifted, maybe we can kind of catch
let's do a recap.
Our viewers. What did money feel like when you first kind of came to us, and when we met? Do you remember what money looked like in your private practice in your life?
I do. I was just reflecting on this recently, but I have always operated personally and professionally from a scarcity model. There just was never enough. I didn't know where things I needed were going to come from. I didn't know if people I could count, if there were people I could count on. So with regards to my practice, I would take pretty much anyone that I thought I could help. And as a social worker, I felt like I could help most people. There were certain, addiction is not my specialty. There are certain specialties that you need extra training on and training in, and I would avoid those areas. But most people I felt I could help. So I would just take them, whether they were a good fit or not. And, you get that sort of pit in your stomach sometimes when it's not a good fit. And, I just would keep plodding along. So something that has shifted for me is just paying attention to and honoring what my value is, what I bring to the table. And paying attention to identifying who my ideal clients are. And reaching out to them, because that's who I do my best work with. And once I was able to kind of identify that there are certain people that I work best with, there was less of a scarcity model. I guess I'm losing my train of thought. I apologize, but I felt like I could show up. I could basically show up and be myself and say, this is who I work best with. I'm going to give you my best work, and I'm going to charge a fair fee for that. Right. And so when I was able to realize that and really sort of understand that I could provide for myself, and not only could I provide for myself, but I could provide for my family, that was a big shift.
Yeah. I think that's just such a common space. We come in from this mindset of like helping and healing and being there for everyone, being the social worker. Most social work programs require you to do volunteer hours, required you to do a lot of unpaid work. And so then when you go out into private practice, you start to get on all the insurance companies, because we want to make sure that everybody can get access to care. And then it doesn't matter whether those insurance companies work well with us, if they reimburse at like livable wages. We just kind of start saying yes to everybody. And then it's just such a frustrating thing. And I think there's a lot of shame when you're working a lot, you're doing everything that you can, and you're still like not making ends meet. Like, well, what am I doing wrong? I'm being careful with my money. I've always been careful, but like, there's still not enough to go around. And then feeling this like frustration because there are things that you need in life or things that you desire.
Yeah. I think, you mentioned insurance. I completely forgot. what a shift that was.
That you
I mean,
used
when
to be
I
on insurance panels.
I was on all the insurance panels, and I was limping along, and it wasn't until COVID that it was so glaringly obvious that insurance companies didn't care about me.
Right.
Reimbursement went down, and so many claims were not paid. I would have it documented in writing, well, from my notes anyway, at the name of the representative I spoke to, telling me exactly what they would reimburse, and then it would just disappear, with no notice. And then you've got to go back to the client. It was just a nightmare. And that's with you guys' help, I decided to come off of insurance panels.
Yeah.
And I give back in other ways. And I'm so glad that I was given sort of encouragement to figure out what my way of giving back was.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'd like to also add for people listening about your niche. And if you want to share just a little bit about who you work with, because I think that also ties into some of the money stuff here.
I have two primary specialties, and one is working with transgender folks, usually in the early stages of coming out and transitioning. And that's a marginalized population. So, I pay attention to that. I want to be there for that population. And then my other specialty is working with childhood trauma, deep wounds, and using EMDR to help people sort of process and heal.
Yeah.
There was a time when the niche was impacting, like, oh, I can't charge this fee because the niche is marginalized. Those kinds of things came up. And so how are you doing with that right now?
It seems like my caseload shifts, every 6 months, 8 months or so. I had a lot of transgender folks 6 months ago, and they've kind of done their work and moved on. And now my caseload is heavier with EMDR. My way of giving back is to use Open Path Collective.
Love that.
So they screen people, and then I market heavily with them towards my transgender folks, letting them know that, I have a slot open for that.
Nice. Love it.
Beautiful.
So when you think about how the practice is right now and all the money stuff, where do you need support today?
Great question. I just raised my fees, and I was using the nuts and bolts worksheet. And really, the first time I did it, I fudged the numbers. I'll be honest. I couldn't handle I couldn't handle as big a jump as it needed to be. So I just left certain expenses off. And this year in particular, I've just realized I need to use real numbers, and I went through it again and came up with a new fee that was significantly higher, and I do 75 and 90-minute sessions for EMDR, and that's a big chunk of money for people.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's just a number. But I think where I'm struggling is how to reach the folks that are able to pay that.
So what are you finding happens when people call and you say, my fee for a 75 or 90-minute session is XYZ? What are you getting told about that?
What I hear a couple things. Either people say right off the bat, I want to use my insurance. Can you recommend someone else? And I do have some names of people that I can refer to. Other times people will say, well, I need to check with my insurance company. And I think that's their way of ending the conversation, because they'll say, I'll get back to you tomorrow, but then they don't call back. Oddly enough, the people that are paying the new fee are men. I don't know whether they just see themselves in a different income bracket or are putting themselves first and more easily. But that's been the call volume lately.
Majority.
Well, and I think that's interesting when you say the call volume. Are you finding that there are more men overall calling, or is it equal amounts and more men are saying yes to the fee?
More men are saying yes to the fee.
Okay.
It's kind of an equal number of callers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is not uncommon for women, for cisgender women in particular, to really struggle with this idea of investing in their own emotional, mental, or medical.
I think all women,
health.
not just cisgender.
Well, but
all women have.
I think it's on both sides, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing as for a trans woman, right? Because they came from this other space where they felt supported, and then they're moving into a marginalized space. And so it's this weird little like, I think there's a little different experience, although they always felt kind of off. They always, they always felt like I don't fit, something doesn't feel right, things. But I do think there's something really interesting about that space. And I wonder if, and we're, obviously we talk about marketing in future spaces, but sometimes as we are having those conversations within our marketing, to talk about like, how hard is it to invest in yourself as someone who you weren't even invested in with a hug. You weren't given food as a child. You weren't listened to. You were told you were lying about the childhood abuse, all the different things that are part of that trauma that can really tie into those spaces and those places that say, no, it's not okay for me. I think the other part too, is your fee on your website yet, or do you have some anxiety about it?
No, that I did that right away. I honestly did that right away. I was kind of surprised that within 24 hours it was there.
It came easily this last round, I recall. Yeah.
So I think that there's a space that's there in terms of, there might be some things we can tweak in with the website and in with the contact page to better prepare your ideal clients for that. But I also wonder if there's something about that conversation around money that you're having, right? That like put our heads in the sand kind of space. Like you actually described it with the nuts and bolts, or our worksheet that we take you through to schedule. I didn't like the numbers, so I just put my head in the sand, right? And I fudged the numbers. I shifted it. So what does this look like if your ideal client is maybe an earlier version of you in some ways? How are they putting their head in the sand? Oh, I'm just going to talk with my insurance company. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to hope that somehow this highly specialized treatment that I need, which is EMDR, at a time when most EMDR therapists have a waiting list, that somehow I'm going to find somebody who works with whatever this budget is. And so do you ever talk about, hey, what is your budget for therapy? Does that conversation come up as part of the consultation?
It doesn't. But you know what? That is the next place to go. It really is to bring that out into the open. So that there's no shame on my side and there's no shame on their side. But like, let's have a conversation. What is your budget and what are the resources out there? Did you hear that? Okay.
You're going to discover, is it truly like, hey, they are budgeting something that's really more for, they need to be referred to a nonprofit. Because when you don't know that information, you can end up sending them on a wild chase of trying to find something when you could really support them, whether it's referring them out or helping them in that moment to work through to make a better decision just by knowing that information. Sometimes people just don't know. They're shocked and they just don't know what to expect. I think what's really unique for you is that your service is beyond the standard, right? Like, oh, I thought everything's just 45 minutes or an hour, but you go beyond that. And there are reasons for that. You have your outcomes are driven by that, all of it. And so they're also trying to assimilate that information along with, okay, how do we compare this, you know, to what I thought it was going to be versus what could really it become for me in my healing.
Yeah, I think there's like that reminds me of that space too. Like you mentioned, wow, I had a lot of people over the last 6 months, they did their work. They got to the ending point, which is beautiful, beautiful. And for a lot of people, they think of therapy as either something you go to twice or something that you're in every week for the rest of your life, right? It feels like there's no like middle ground. And so to be able to say, hey, I usually work with people on average about this long. Everyone's different, but on average, people stay about this long. About this percentage of the people that work with me say this, that these are the symptoms that have come down, that their PTSD, they no longer would qualify as post-traumatic stress disorder chronic after they've worked with me for 5 months or 6 months or what have you. Like to just describe, and not in a false, hey, I'm promising that everything's going to happen in 6 weeks and this is, but just helping them to understand versus
some framework.
Some framework versus when I've gone to EMDR therapists who were very nice people. But as an EMDR therapist, I could very quickly see you're not using the protocol. And then it's awkward when I'm like, okay, I'm not getting these results. And I know it should be working and it's not. But now I'm like, can you do an EMDR right for me, please? Get what I need, right? So I know how hard it is to find a really good, impactful, effective therapist, even an effective EMDR therapist. And I happily would have paid more to have somebody who said, like, no, I work all the time. Here's how this works. Like, let's dive in and get it done.
So before they even say, I'll need to check with my insurance, having that conversation to say, you know, I want to understand what your expectation is or what you were planning for. Can you tell me what your budget is? You know?
Yeah. I like that. I think that's really the next place for me to go. And I think that'll help the client, the potential client, whether they work with me or not. I think it will just help them.
And it'll give you great information as you like go into your marketing and decide where you're going to make changes. It's beneficial to you both. That's the beauty of this stuff, is when that clinical and business intersect and you become better for that kind of conversation.
And one of the ways that one of the languaging pieces I've used, just to give you like really like dive down into specifics, is, hey, my fee is this for a 75-minute session. How does that work with your budget? Oh, that's more than I thought. Oh, what were you budgeting? So it's right away. It's just here's the fee. How does that work for you? Does that work within your budget? Oh, actually, no. Like, oh, that's more than I was thinking. Cool. What was your budget? And it just kind of puts it in play. And I think especially, again, going back to the current niche that you're working with a lot with the traumatized individuals, right? Having somebody just talk about money or resources or desires or needs or boundaries in this like just normal, beautiful way, like
with ease.
It's reparative. Just your consult. If you just spend 15 minutes and they just hear someone just talking about this in this different way, they may have never, ever had someone say, hey, well, what do you need? Oh, do I get to say that? Yeah, you get to say that. Oh, you know what? It's $10. I was thinking it would be like $20, like a $20 copay. I totally understand that. Unfortunately, nowadays, most people, they have a pretty significant deductible. It's about this much, most people, that's just not how it's working with insurance any longer. Sometimes that works with your insurance plan. A lot of times people are having co-insurance. It looks like about this much, even in a network. This is what I'm seeing locally. So here's the part. And there are some nonprofits, but even in a nonprofit, like I had people asking for sliding scales that were asking for, I was hoping for $60 a session, but they were making $150,000 a year. I can send them to a nonprofit, but the sliding scale is not going to get them down to $60 a session.
Right.
And that was, 10 years ago.
A while ago.
Yeah.
So before we change the marketing, we just shift the conversation. And I think that also demonstrates how you are in session as well. I know you don't ignore, and that you call out in a loving way what you're seeing. And so it gives them even a more greater sense of how it is to work with you.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Because I feel like it's not been a disconnect really on the conversations, but we've just needed to go deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just needed to go deeper.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
And that's where you like to hang out, honestly.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Now, the one piece that I would say is that you might find that sometimes we extend the first part of the consult call and we don't leave enough room to talk about the money, right? So in a 15-minute conversation, if you were, let's say you were doing 12 minutes identifying, talking about how you work, all this stuff, and then you left 3 minutes at the end to talk about money, it's not going to be as impactful. So do be thinking about that, like, oh, maybe I've been going a little deeper on this front end and I haven't been leaving quite enough space, right? And we don't want to get into this scenario too, where suddenly now we're doing 15 minutes of a consult and then we're talking about money for 15 minutes, right? So we got to find some balance. So be thinking about that too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So now we're going to take a deep breath in.
This isn't as bad as I was hearing.
Well, number one, you've done a ton of work, right?
Yeah.
So let's just honor that for a moment, because we're not coming in and saying, Lisa, I know, and maybe we can always edit this out, but we've had conversations where you're like, Miranda, I really need to work out and move my body, but I can't afford the gym. And I'm like, Lisabeth, how much is the gym? And I remember it was something like $40,
60 a month.
It was $60 a month. I'm like, Lisabeth, something's wrong. If you can't afford a $60 a month gym, what is happening right now? And it was like these little pieces would come out as to that fudging of the numbers, right? That you were not charging a fee that was really viable. And so you have done all of that deeper work. So now as you have a better foundation and more comfort with money, then we get to go on those nuances kind of stuff. And it's like, actually, it's not scary. Because also, right, and that same trickle down of we've kind of modeled for you talking about money in a loving, open, non-judgmental way. And you've been able to integrate that over the last couple of years. And now you get to go, oh yeah, of course I could easily talk to my clients like this.
And this, whoever's listening is going to hear this, that's starting their practice. And I'm going to start doing this now, having these conversations now. And that's the ripple effect. That's your kind of legacy work, not just for you and taking care of your family, but now how others who are listening are going to learn to take care of themselves too.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Okay. So again, going back and just taking a deep breath in and thinking about just making this little shift and this little tweak. I want you just to scan from the top of your head all the way down your body. And I want you to notice any sticky points or any energized points. I want you just to kind of notice anything that stands out, good or bad, neutral or numb. No judgment about any of it. Just kind of notice.
It floors me that as someone who has lived with chronic pain for decades, that I can just be aware of a sensation in my back, and it's no longer pain, discomfort, debilitating. It's just a sensation, and I can, I don't know, I'm learning to pay attention to what it looks like, what the shape is. Does it move, contract, all that kind of stuff. And that just gives me so much more control and power over it. Whereas it just used to control my life. So I'm just aware. I'm aware of a sensation in my back, but it's not painful.
Yeah.
I
think it's so fascinating too. I bet there was probably a time too, if we'd been talking about money, you could have noticed this sensation in your back that it expanded or it shifted or it started to move. I went in for a Rolfing session, I think last week, and I had noticed that there was pain in my back before the session, like, oh, in the middle of my back, there's this pain and it felt old. I'm like, this spot is hurting again. And I went in and some conversation started. I kind of just started to cry. And then I'm, just expressing myself in the session. And then the person asked, hey, what do you notice? I'm like, I noticed that this pain in my back is resolving itself. And I'm so irritated to know that it was emotional and I didn't realize it, but it's lovely to know that just having a good cry will release the pain, but it's also irritating at the same time. So I think there's some interesting spaces too. That's just a little aside about how integrate, like our body gives us so much data and information. And I'm sure there are people listening that when they think about even charging a fee for their sessions, that if they were to just scan through their body, they're like, oh, I feel it in my chest. Oh, I feel it like my knees come together or my butt clenches or all these different experiences. And to kind of listen and be aware of what's happening in your body, because it can give you really good data if there's anything that needs to be kind of explored.
I think it's something maybe, Lisabeth, to consider doing after every consult, a little body scan and just seeing what happens to that piece in your back, what other things move or shift the more you practice this conversation too, and let your body provide some wisdom for the process.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so excited for what this means for you. I can't wait to hear back. I hope that you will, obviously, we do coaching with you all the time. So you'll be sharing it week to week how this all actually plays out. But I think a lot of people are going to be helped by this conversation in particular.
And I just want to highlight that this is like an integrative approach, right? We aren't just talking about, oh, here's the math and that's what it is and that's how it is and that's it. But it's understanding your story. It's like sitting within your body, opening your heart to possibility and letting like spirit, that energy kind of guide you. And you did a beautiful demonstration of that today, which I hope other people can pick up on, of what it means to start your practice, to do your practice in a way that's very integrated and grounded and being honest. I think above all else, especially on money, honesty is so key here. So thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability today and sharing. And if anyone's listening, give a shout out to Lisabeth, because
I would just, the two of you, I've said it before, have changed my life. I mean, personally and professionally, you just have. And it started with a vision, and it started with the ideal day, like just giving me permission to dream. And then everything I needed and need is there to put it into play. And it's not easy. It's not, it's not easy, but I have support and I have the confidence, and I'm just delighted with where I'm at in 2 years.
Yes, we're delighted with you.
Yes. And what that means for the clients that you're working with. I think this is the piece too that we often forget, is that I know you're an amazing therapist before, Lisabeth. Like I know you have been rocking it out for decades doing this work. And I know that the farther you go personally, the farther you can take your clients.
Yeah.
And so every breakthrough that we make as healers is an opportunity to help our clients go to that next level. And if we stay static and stuck, then we can only take them that far.
Yeah.
So I think it's just absolutely beautiful. And I'm so excited to have been able just to be witness to it all.
Awesome.
And thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Lisabeth.